Be sure you download the note card that goes along with this sermon, and you can print it out and you can follow along, fill it in as you follow the sermon. If you like this sermon, want to see more like this, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, also hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when other new content is added to this site. We try to add sermons as often as we can. We'll try to add some Bible question and answers that we've done before in the past, other things we may be adding to this. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to follow us on social media, there are links to our social media accounts in the video description below. Now, let's jump into the sermon.
With this lesson, we began a 9-lesson study of the book of Joshua. There on the screen, you see it roughly, depending on the timeline you go by, roughly 1375 to 1300 BC, the time period covered. And this may help you a little bit. This one puts it out around that time period. Looking at the bars, you see the 40 years wandering, and then right after that, conquest of Canaan, then the book of Judges. Leaving off in the book of Deuteronomy, it ended with the death of Moses and the handing over of leadership to Joshua, Moses' second in command. We want you to get an idea kind of the lay of the land, so to speak. If you look over to your right, you can see Mount Pisgah, Mount Nebo. The location, you see the valley, you see the high mountains there that Mount Pisgah is a part of. You have the lowland valley, the plains of Moab, and of course the Jordan River where they cross. We'll show something for the Jordan River here in a minute. And Jericho, the first place they come into and do battle. A breakdown of the book of Joshua. We find that the book of Joshua is number 6 in not of the books in the Bible. 24 chapters. It's, of course, history. Our first history book in the Old Testament. Not a part of the Pentateuch. The first 5 books were the Pentateuch. Genesis through Deuteronomy we just finished. Again, depending on who you look at, thought about 1375, maybe covering a period of 1400 to 1375. What I find in most places, Joshua and scribes are the author. The first 5 chapters, now this is the way I'd laid it out. The spies entering Jericho is what we'll look at first. Defeating Jericho, battles with Ai, defeating the Gibeonites, actually helping the Gibeonites. Sun standing still, remember that story of Joshua 10 through 12. Distribution of the land when the war ends in Joshua's old age, likely 87 years old. Then in 22 through 24, Joshua dies at 110 years old. His final orders and subsequent death is covered. Another way I've shown the overview is for a long time with this chart. The conquest of Canaan up to chapter 13, verse 8, settlement in Canaan. Settlements east of Jordan, settlements west of Jordan, settlement of the religious community and conditions for continued settlement, or we call it dividing of Canaan. We already know that 2.5 tribes on the east side of the Jordan, 2.5 tribes on the west side of Jordan. 6 years to settle the land, 7 years for the conquest, and then 1 month of preparation that will be into the first 5 chapters, the preparation. Bible Project's pretty good pictorial. We began to look at this chart, the story so far. We've seen Abraham, we've seen Moses, we've seen Mount Sinai, the covenant given, of course, Exodus chapter 20, the re-giving in Deuteronomy we just covered, wilderness wandering, and in there they were at the cusp of going into the promised land in Deuteronomy, now to obey. And I would say that chart probably needs to be turned around because they should be on the right side instead of the left side. But anyway, we'll leave it as it is. Chapters 1 through 5, we'll see another chart here in a minute, shows this a different way. Joshua leads Israel. Joshua is the maybe thought of as the new Moses. It's always hard to come in behind someone that has been highly successful. I don't envy anyone in that task. Chapter 1 says for him to obey the commands of the Torah, the law. And we'll look at that in a minute. The sending of the spies. We have to, they sent spies before when they were getting ready to go into the promised land. Then, of course, they didn't listen to the report, so they had 40 years of wandering. Now they're about to go in again, so we send another set of spies to go in, check out the land. They went in from the southern end before. Then there'll be battles with the Canaanites, chapter 6 through 12, 13 through 22, Joshua divides up the land. 23 through 24, Joshua's final words. And we'll get into this chart as we need different parts of it. We'll study this further. I just wanted this up here for you to see in this introduction. Another overview, it's kind of fuzzy, and I guess I need to redo this chart again. I redid it a few years ago, but I think I'd saved it in the wrong format, and that's why it's kind of buzzed out. I'll try to get it redone. 1 through 5, they're preparing the calling and responsibility of godly leadership, the conquering, the implementation of God's strategy for victory. God designs the strategy, dividing the accountability to God's mission, complete God's mission, that is the land. I wanted you to see a topographical view. Off to the left is the Mediterranean Sea. I want you to see how high the mountains are on the right side as you look. Looking at it this way would be, the east side. See my north indicator up there to give me my direction. Then there's that valley along the Jordan River, and we'll show that here in a minute. And then you have hill country. It's not really mountainous looking like the east side. You look to the north and you see Mount Hermon looks a whole lot taller. So that's the terrain they have to deal with. We see flat maps and we think, oh, flat country. Maybe we think we're back in eastern Arkansas again. See, flat country, it's where you have that mud, I can't think of the name of it now, that just seems like the more you walk outside in the rain, the taller you get. You want to get 6 foot tall, walk a little bit, that mud will definitely cling to you. Canaan, before the conquest, at the time they're getting ready to come in, I want you to see all these nations. We start out to the south, the Amalekites, the Edomites, come around to the east side, the Moabites, of course, the Edomites, there's the Zered River, and then the Moabites, there's the Arnon River. Of course, we know Naaman speaks of the Arnon River, Damascus and all those rivers. Ammonites, we have the Jabbok River, the Amorites, the area around the Jabbok River, Amorites to the north, the Hittites, that gets the east side. Now come the west side, we'll go from the south down. Amalekites, Philistines, we'll get more into them in the book of Judges. The Hittites, Jebusites, Jerusalem was a Jebusite city. Canaanites, Hivites, Hittites, Canaanites once again. The Perizzites, Canaanites, Girgasites. That's the nations that are in the land that they're to overcome when they go in to conquer. Here's another map that shows the cities. We talk about the Southern Campaign, and these are some of the cities. Now, this map is kind of turned sideways. You see over on the legend there on the right top, north is kind of off at a 45-degree angle, so if you straighten that up, you'd understand. But of course, it looked like the guy there would be laying down, you'd think. But there's the cities. The ones in yellow are the ones we have mention of Jericho, Ai, Jarmuth, Libnah, Lachish, Makkedah, Eglon, Debir, and Hebron. Those cities. Question marks are there because we're not sure of the exact location of some of those cities. Now, how the conquest is going to take place of the land, we'll get into this further, but I just want you to see this. Here they've come up on the east side. You see the names of the cities: Jazer, Ashtaroth, Bashan, kingdom of Og, remember that? And then they came back down. Amorite country, kingdom of Shion, the Amorite king. And then there's crossing Jericho in, and then of course they take the southern route. They have the southern conquest, and then the northern have a central conquest and then a northern conquest. And here's a map in black and white to show you names of the attacks. Israel crosses Jordan. First battles and journeys, number 2. Number 3, the 5 kings attack Gibeon, and we'll get into the study of why they have to help Gibeon out. They are tricked kind of by Gibeon, but they don't do their due diligence. It's buyer beware. You know how that is today. Joshua goes to rescue Gibeon. Number 5, the battle of the longest day. We talk about the longest day, and we'll get into the thoughts about the earth's axis and all that when we get over there. Joshua captures southern cities. So that's what we have. Speaking of that southern campaign, again, here is a topographical map with these cities in. So you kind of see there's some hills in there, you'll see, but it's not as bad as that mountain region was. Another view. And this, again, you see the valley, you see the big hills on the east side, you see the not so big hills, but they still, mountains be on the east, the hill country on the west side, and there's those cities kind of showing us. The northern conquest, of course, you see the Sea of Galilee. Of course, the 5 kings we talk about all the time. We talk about with the southern, but here is that conquest around the Sea of Galilee. And once again, here are the northern kings. Joshua chapter 11, 1 through 9. We'll get into this further. Now, I want to look at the Jordan River. The Jordan River, when I kind of saw it, reminded me of the same idea I had when I first saw the Rio Grande. It just didn't seem like that big a river. Of course, the Rio Grande, I understand why they can wade across it, but once you see it, you'll see that too. I was surprised the Rio Grande, for the most part, has a concrete base, but that really surprised me. Someone told me that. But let's look at the Jordan River. Here's the Jordan River from a drone's eye view. Now, this is heading north, meandering around, and of course, it's flowing out of over there on the top right, Sea of Galilee. And that's the trek it's going to take. And you can kind of see the valley look, the trek it takes as it comes through there. Another view of the Jordan River. Not that wide, is it, when you look at it there? Now, this map explains a little more. At the base end, this is the end where it goes into the Dead Sea, Salt Sea. It's 2 miles wide at that point, 3.2 kilometers. Water depth 100 feet at that point, 30 meters. There's Shittim, there's Gilgal tell Jericho. In other words, that's the dig at Jericho, where they believe Jericho was at that time. Now, this blue outline, that's not showing a lake or anything. That's just an outline of the delta area, I guess you'd call of the Jordan River. But you see how it changes look down through there. It gets a little wider and then narrows down before it comes in. That's all that showed, the fertile delta part of it, I guess you would call it, and some places. Here's points of interest. Again, Jericho. There's the possible, what they think is the crossing site. And in that baptismal site they have there, they believe that's the site where Jesus was baptized. Of course, no one knows. But that's just I don't know if you'd call it even an educated guess. That's just a guess, a surmise, so to speak. So let's begin to get into this. I wanted you to have those pictures in your mind as we start looking in this first chapter. There's not a whole lot for us to talk about, but we certainly will try to cover what we have as we can. Now, as we began this study, I still want to remind you that I, for the most part, use the English Standard Version of the Bible. Every once in a while, I'll refer to the New King James. Use whatever translation you wish, but if you want to follow along, and you might want to follow along in the English Standard Version, that's fine. You won't hurt my feelings if you want to use another one. Just make sure it's a reliable translation. Sometimes that's hard to find. Some of these translations, I don't mean to get on a rabbit hunt, but some of these translations try to add their own bias into it. So I like to get one that you don't really have that happening. The first part of the book of Deuteronomy, I like to label as developing God's people. The calling, responsibility of God's godly leadership. That is, preparing to go in and do the job that God expects to be done. Chapter 1, we pretty well see that happening. In chapter 1 and 2 is what we're going to cover in this study. We're going to look at Joshua leading the people and getting Joshua ready, what Joshua needs to do. He's following Moses, so that's big shoes to fill, as they say. I, kind of think of a child putting their dad's shoes on and they barely can get around in them. Eventually they'll have feet bigger than dad's are, but at the time they don't. Hard shoes to fill. Chapter 1, developing godly leaders. Chapter 1 beginning, I have a heading, Pickery, they call that in my Bible. God commissions, that commissions means chooses, anoints Joshua to be the leader. It begins in verse 1, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun. Now, his mother was not a Catholic. That's not what that says. He was Moses' assistant. He says, Moses, my servant, is dead. I've heard people preach on that and say that's the best epitaph you can have on your tombstone. Not pepperoni, but have Moses, my servant, is dead. He says, now therefore arise, go over this Jordan. You're going to go. Remember, Moses couldn't go. We got into that before. You and all this people into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. I'm giving it to you. Now, that don't mean they don't have anything to do. They have to go. It's like someone gives you a present at Christmas time. First of all, You generally have to go where the present is, sit down, and then be given the presence, but in order to enjoy the benefits of the present, you have to open it, generally. So there is something to do. So to go over this Jordan, you and this people, into the land that I am giving them to the people of Israel, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, just as I promised to Moses. Then he names the boundaries from the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the Euphrates, and to all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. Great sea being the Mediterranean Sea. Verse 5, I like 5, says, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous. 7 things for Joshua to be successful. And I have a sermon I've done on this called 7 Spiritual Success. 7 things for spiritual success, or some way like that. All comes from this section right here. And then we can go everywhere looking at that, but we won't do that. I'll just give you the points today, and you can flesh that out if you want to. First of all, be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land. So number 1, be strong and courageous. The land that I swore to their fathers. Then he repeats that, very important. So if you repeat something, that's very important. Only be strong and very courageous. Number 2, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Be careful. Do the law. Little further on that. Do not turn from it to the right. Don't go too conservative. Don't go ultra-conservative, ridiculously conservative, or to the left. Don't go ultra-liberal. You're somewhere in the middle. And he says that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from you. So number 3, here's what you'll do. You will meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it, for then you will make your way prosperous, have good success. He says, have I not commanded you? Here's the 3rd time, be strong and courageous. He says, do not be frightened, number 4. Number 5, do not be dismayed. Number 6, and I guess I'd split strong and courageous, so that's where we have the 7. And he says, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So Joshua assumes the command as we're looking at chapter 1. Now, the first 5 verses, and I should have pointed this out, is the mission. Chapter 1, we've read about the mission. The mission is to go into the land that God has given you, do what God says to conquer the land. People aren't going to just die because you come in there. God has a strategy to conquer, and we'll get into God's strategy about that. We have looked at the next point, developing godly leadership, 1 through 9, those steps of success that we just read. 7 keys is how we develop godly leadership. That's what you do. Godly elders need to take heed to do those steps. Make sure they're following those steps, what we would want. Now, verse 10, we want to look at maximum mobilization. Watch verse 10. He says, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan, to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now let me back up. He commands the people and the officers. What that simply says, verse 10, we missed 10. Verse 12, to the Reubenites, the Gadites, the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. It says, your wives and little ones, notice they're getting ready for this battle, said, your wives and your little ones and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan, but all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them. You're going to help. Now, the rest of the chapter says how long they're going to help. Verse 16, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you. And they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession, shall possess it, the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. Sun rises in the east, sets in the west. So that's a big help on telling you where your directions are. 16, they answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Joshua's glad to hear that, I'm sure. No mutiny. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandments and disobeys your words, whatever you command him, shall be put to death. Only, here it is again, fourth time we've seen this, only be strong and courageous. So the way you start is important, being strong and courageous. Now, chapter 2, God's mysterious ways to get ready. Now, remember, over in the book of Numbers, and was it about 10? I believe it was. Let's go over there and look, see. Well, we have the complaint there. I'm seeing all kinds of headings, and I'm seeing all kinds. There's the leaving of, yeah, right in the area of 10, the spies sent in. And, of course, what happens when the spies are sent in over in Numbers? Well, remember, they don't listen to the good reports. They, if you recall, they rebel. They decide they can't do it, so they're left to wander in the wilderness 40 years. We have that happening. Now they're going to send spies again. Maybe they've learned, this second generation has learned, we need to listen to the report. And look at God's part, not just man's part. Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men. Now, before it was 10, this time it's 2, from Shittim as spies, saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, lodged there. Now, Rahab is kind of interesting about Rahab, and I want to catch this on the very start. If you go over to the book of Matthew, now I realize this is jumping ahead a bunch of years, but when we get into the New Testament, the book of Matthew, I do want you to see, if you go down through this book, you're going to go down through here and you're going to find out that in the descendants of Jesus is listed Rahab. Salome, the father of Boaz, by, here she is, Rahab. And so she's in the family tree of Jesus. Right here's our first introduction. And they lodged there. It was told to the king of Jericho, behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. Then the king of Israel sent to Rahab, saying, Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, and she said, True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to close at dark, the men went out and said, I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. And of course, she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. She's drying it out on the roof. That's a good place to dry things, on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan as far as the fords. That's the area, along the edges. We'd call that the Delta land today, a real fertile land. And the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. And so before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters. Now look at what they had heard about Israel in their travels. There's a lot of years passed by here, 40. Heard that the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 other kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Shion and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. Boy, she just knows their history. As soon as we heard of it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on the earth. See, she recognizes that because they had success. She says, now please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house. Give me a sure sign. Now, this is a story very familiar to all of us. That you will save alive my father, mother, my brothers, sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. And the men said to her, Our life for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall. And it says she lived in the wall. Verse 16. She said to them, Go into the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned, and afterward you may go your way. The men said to her, We will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours that you have made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall tie this scarlet cord in the window. Now, that's probably the cord that she'd let them down by, through which you let us down. There it is. You shall gather into your house, and your father and mother, your brothers, and all your father's household. Then if anyone goes out of the doors of the house into the street, his blood shall be on his head. In other words, you stay where we tell you, and the Lord will take care of you. That's like today. If we stay where the Lord wants us to stay, in His Word, following His ways, the Lord will take care of us. But when we depart from His ways, we're on our own. And that's what she says. She's told here. And she said, According to your word, so be it. Then she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. So she's ready. She's got that cord there. They departed and went into the hills and remained there 3 days until the pursuers returned. They searched all along the way and found nothing. Then the 2 men returned. They came down from the hills, passed over, came to Joshua, the son of Nun, told him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, Truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land melt because of us. Now that's where we want to stop in the story today. We want to continue our study. We want to invite you back to continue this study with us. As next lesson, we will be looking at Joshua chapter 3 through 5, Israel's crossing of the Jordan and the conquest of Jericho. That's what we want to look at in our next lesson. If you found this video helpful and want to learn more, be sure to download any note cards we might put with this lesson. Also, you can write us at macmikeal@mac.com for a copy of our free 4-lesson Bible correspondence course. We hope to get that back online soon. And that's our address. We here at the Spring Hill Church of Christ want to help you with your growth in the knowledge of God's Word. Thus, we are putting this material onto the internet, onto the various publishing sites. Remember, we are in it for the likes and the subscriptions. So be sure to subscribe. With that, thanks for watching or listening. In the meantime, in between time, we'll see you next time. Cheerio, mate. Bob's your uncle.